Hello there, welcome back to my channel. Today I am finally ready to give you my thoughts on a bunch of products from Alter Ego. They were so kind to send me a huge PR box with 3 of their eyeshadow palettes. They sent me their brush set, their eyeshadow primer, and 6 of their matte liquid lipsticks. So I'm going to be talking about all of these products, but we're going to be focusing the most attention on the eyeshadow palettes. Now, I'm sure if you have watched any number of videos here on YouTube, you have probably seen a YouTuber showing at least one of these Alter Ego palettes with its counterpart from Natasha Denona and saying, this is definitely a dupe. Well, is it? I'm going to be addressing that big question and giving you swatches and details and everything. I'm also going to share with you this look, a little tutorial on this look, including my lip and cheek combo. So if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get started. So before receiving this package, I had never actually tried anything from Alter Ego, but I was always curious to do it because even though I own a lot of Natasha Denona palettes, I don't own them all. And there are a few palettes that I've just not wanted to invest the big money in because I didn't think the overall color story was one I would use very much. So I've always been curious. Now they sent me 3 eyeshadow palettes and I own the Natasha Denona palettes that are very similar to these color stories. Let's see if you can guess them as I show you. So this is Shadow Kiss. So think to yourself, what palette does this replicate from Natasha Denona, if you know any of her palettes? The second one was Canyon. And then the third is Harmony. And this is their most recent release. And as you probably know, this is one of my favorite color stories. Now the eyeshadow palettes come with 15 grams of product. They retail for $17. They have a really nice mirror. They're good, sturdy quality. I think they're really nicely done. So I've really been impressed by that. I am going to show you swatches, but I'm going to save that to the end because I'm showing you swatches compared to Natasha Denona. So before we get to that, as far as their brushes go, this is a full set. There's 4 face brushes and 8 eyeshadow brushes. And overall, I've actually found these to be very nice and soft. I've only washed them once, but they held up well. I haven't had any shedding. And I feel like you are getting a pretty decent combination of eyeshadow brushes and face brushes to where you can do a full eye look. In fact, I do this whole eye look today with these brushes, and I feel like you can get pretty much your full face done with these brushes, except for maybe a foundation brush. I feel like these might be just a little too flimsy for foundation, but work great for powder. This set retails for $26, comes with the bag. The bag's really nice, so I've really been enjoying that. Now the eyeshadow primer that they sent to me and the matte liquid lipsticks, I'm gonna talk about those more as I apply them in the demo. Now, speaking of, we're gonna jump into that next. I'm gonna show you how I did this eye look using the brushes, the eyeshadow, the lip look. It looks a little glossy, so I'll explain that. And then be sure you stay tuned to the end because we have some comparison swatches of all 3 Natasha Denona palettes with these Alter Ego ones. And I'm gonna answer the big question. Are they really dupes of each other? Is the formula the same? The colors the same? So find out, stay tuned to the end. Now let's get to the tutorial. You'll have to just ignore my wild and crazy hair while we go through this. I changed directions midstream of blow drying and that's never a good idea. All right, let's get to the eyeshadow. I'm gonna start off with the Alter Ego eyeshadow base. And I like how this applies. It is a very thin, lightweight formula. It adds maybe just a hint of brightness on the lid. However, if you have super oily eyelids like I do, this is not going to be the best option for you. But if you just need it for a shorter day or you don't have super oily eyelids, I think this is a really nice one. And I think the normal price of it is $6. But it does make the eyelid feel and look slightly smoother and diminish a little bit of the discoloration there. And we're going into the Harmony palette, and I'm going to be using, I think for the most part, all of the Alter Ego brushes. I'm going to start off, this is just kind of the fluffy angled brush. They all just have numbers. So this is number 10. I'm going to go into this one first, which is Shy, and then just tap into this one. This white is super pigmented. This Shy shade, however, is one of the more like cream to powder formulations, which I will talk about a little more at the end of the video, but I'm going to place a little bit of this here because that white is so bright. It's just a little too light for me, so I don't want to have too much. And I'm going to wipe off that brush and just a light tap into that white shade, and I'm just going to go right under the arch of the brow just to give me the illusion of a lift there. Next, I'm going to use one of my favorite brushes in the collection. This is number 5. It's slightly dense but fluffy. It just works really well for multiple uses on the eye. So I'm going to go into the crease. I'm first going to tap just a touch in the white shade, which is True. You can see how pigmented that is. And then I'm going to go into this shade, Tender. I'm going to do this for the top of the crease. I am tapping off my brush. There is some powder kick up, but they are pigmented. The pigment does transfer well to the eyes, but you will have to tap off your brush. So now that I've gotten kind of that initial layer down, I'm going to go in just with Tender now and build that up in the crease. You can see I really have no issues with blending. They do build on themselves very well. All right, we're going to deepen the outer corner, and I'm going in with their flat shader brush. This is the number 9, and I'm going to go into this beautiful shade right here. It's called Sense, and this is one of my favorite kinds of colors. As you'll see it apply, you will understand why. It is one of those beautiful kind of plummy maroon shades. So there's a hint of some redness for sure in here, but this is a great color, especially if you have green eyes. I just love this shade. And I'm just packing that on, going up to, I'm going into the crease, and then I'm going to slightly bring it above, and then I'll go back in with the number 5 brush. Just blend the top of that. And you can see, I mean, really effortless to blend. So that is a really good thing. And then I'm going to take the tip of that brush and I'll touch into Tender and Sense. And just further soften and carry that shade up just a little more because I have hooded eyes. I need to be able to see it when I look straight ahead, so that's why I always do this step. And then taking my finger, I'm going to go into one of the most beautiful shades. This is called Chime, and this is a very pigmented, just soft, kind of rosy taupe shade. It's so pretty, and it works well dry. I'm going to show it to you dry here with my finger, but you can really intensify it if you dampen your brush, which is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to take this flatter brush, this is the number 8, and I've added a little more of that Chime shade, and I'm going to use just a little bit of Charlotte Tilbury fixing spray, or airbrush setting spray, I should say. And I'm just going to apply a little more of that, and you can see how much more shine and pigment comes through and just how nice and smooth that looks. And then right before that dries, I'm going to go in with a little bit, let's use this shade right here. This is Charity. And this is one that's definitely a little bit on the flaky side. You do need to apply it either wet or with your finger. And I feel like it works best over a base shadow because there isn't a lot of color to it by itself, but when placed over an eyeshadow, I think it's really pretty. And then just for fun, let me show you just a little bit of this one, which is Chorus. And this one has more gold. So Charity has more silver. This one has a little more gold. I just always love mixing and matching. Here we go. All right, as a final step, I just like to take my brush through the crease. So again, this is the number 5 brush. I really do love this brush. And I just like to take it through the crease just so there's no harsh distinction between those shimmer shades and our crease shades. On the lower lash line, I'm going to go in first with the Nabla Cupid's Arrow pencil, and this is in the shade number 7. This is a real nice kind of reddish brown shade. A little more brown than the color we have in the outer corner, but real close to the same shade. I'm going to use this just as a base. You can see I just like to smudge it in towards the center. I don't take it solidly into the inner corner, but close. And then I'm going to go in, this is a dual-ended, this is probably more of a brow brush, but this is a really nice soft angled brush on one end. This is number 12. And I'm going to use the same shade we used in the outer corner, this Sense shade. I'm going to use this just right here on the outer corner. And this just helps set that liner in place. It gives a little more connection to those corner colors that we have in the upper lid. And then I'm going to wipe off that brush and let's go in with Tender. I'm going to use this to just further soften the rest of the way across, soften that line the rest of the way across and set it. And then let's add a little bit of shimmer and shine down here, shall we? Let's add a little bit of the shade Chime. I'm just going to use that right in the center here. Okay, then before I go in with liner on the upper lash line, I'm going to take that angled brush with a little more of Sense. And what I'm going to do is going to take, because I have hooded eyes, I have to do this. If I'm going to do any kind of winged liner, I'm not going to do anything crazy, but I want to make sure that this whole area under here is filled in with shadow. And then I don't feel like it's quite as harsh of a line on the upper lash line because I'm going to use liquid liner there. It also gives you kind of a nice guide that's easier to wipe off and fix than if you get liquid liner and it's not even and you don't like how it looks. It's a little harder to start over with liquid liner. And just a little quick kind of blend here on the outer corner. All right, for liquid liner, I'm going to use the IT Cosmetics Superhero liquid liner. I need a new one of these. I'm going to just attempt, we always start off with good intentions, right? With just a tiny little flick, and then before we know it, it grows into a huge, big dramatic wing. We're going to try not to do that today. So just staying real close to the lash line. And then just a little bit of a flick here. And I'm going to take that about 2/3 of the way across. So I'm not going to take it all the way into the inner corner. I am going to stop just about right there. And then just thicken the line slightly. As you can obviously see, I applied mascara. This is the trio I used. I'll link these products down in the description box below. I wanted to hop on here, even though I don't have cheek products from Alter Ego, I am going to use a couple of the larger brushes. So I'm going to use the Laura Geller Baked Bronze and Brighten, and this is in the fair shade. This is a newer one I recently picked up. And then I'm going to use the brush number 2 from Alter Ego. Let's see how this works. These brushes are really nice and soft. This one has some density to it, so, oh, it's not too bad. Okay, sometimes if a brush is more dense, it'll apply the product a little too strongly, but actually that's really nice. So really nice and soft. I haven't used these face brushes on cream products, but they are synthetic fibers, so you should be able to, but I'm just gonna use powder products today. And I really have been enjoying this shade. I also have the medium shade, which I've used in the summertime. It has a little more, I feel like a little more warmth. This has a little more pink tones. All right, let's just build that up enough. I think this is gonna be my one and done cheek color. You know, we might be finding a dupe for Sweetie Pie bronzer. Ooh, wouldn't that be nice? Okay. I know that's not the topic of this video. Okay, now these are the other 3 face brushes, and this one you can see is slightly larger. It also has kind of more of a kind of pointed rounded tip. So this one I've used before for kind of face powder. And then the blush brush is smaller, but still nice and soft. I wish it was a little bit larger, but it could still work really well, especially for cream blush. And then this one is a great contour brush. All right, now we are going to try out some of the matte liquid lipsticks. Now, I'm not gonna try all these on for you because I'm actually planning to gift a couple of them. So I'm not gonna actually even swatch them, but these are kind of the deeper end of the spectrum. This one has a little more plummy tones, but it's a little brighter than it appears on the outside of the packaging. But these 2 I have actually tested out before, so I'm gonna show those to you today, and I'm gonna share with you how I actually personally wear them. Because these are a matte liquid lipstick, they do dry down, and they're just a tad drying for me personally. But let's start off with our lip liner, and of course, my MAC Soft Ochre Paint Pot. I just do this, first of all, to even out my lip line, and then it prevents any bleeding past the lip line, which you're not gonna have with the matte liquid lipstick, but I'm gonna add a gloss on top, so that's why I need that on today. For my lip liner, I'm gonna use the Urban Decay 24/7 Glide On Pencil in the shade Liar. This is just kind of a nice neutral, kind of matte rosy shade. The 2 shades that I have here are Crush and Euphoria. Let me swatch these for you. I'll wipe them off quickly because they are pretty, they do set down pretty well. So that is a really beautiful shade. That is the shade Euphoria. So even though this looks slightly warmer and lighter, you can tell once you swatch it, it is darker. It's kind of like paint, you know, when paint dries, it's a darker, usually a more intense color. That's kind of how I feel like matte liquid lipsticks are. And then this is the shade Crush. So obviously a lot more pink, a lot brighter. I think I'm actually just going to use Euphoria today. So let me apply this. Okay, I've let that sit for about a minute or so. So it's had an opportunity to dry down, and it does pretty much, it's almost transfer proof. If I let it sit for just a little bit longer, it'll dry down pretty much to where it's a very little transfer. But as it dries down, it does, it's just a typical matte liquid lipstick, which is not my personal favorite formula. But what I do appreciate about this formula is it works well with a gloss over the top. Sometimes matte liquid lipsticks, when you put a gloss on, it just makes it just become all smeary and it starts bleeding and it makes it just come off. The last time I wore this, I topped it with a little gloss. This is the HUDA Lip Strobe in Angelic, which they don't make anymore. I know, I'm sorry, but this is just one of my favorite toppers. And when I put this on top, my whole lip combination lasted really well and it did not bleed and break down the liquid lipstick underneath. So I'm gonna add just a little bit of that. Okay, here is almost the finished look. We forgot inner corner highlight. What? I'm gonna use the brush number 11. This is just a nice pointed bullet point brush. And I'm actually gonna dip into the Shadow Kiss palette. We could go into the matte white in the Harmony palette, but I just thought, hey, while I've got this other palette here, we might as well, right? So I'm gonna go into the shade called Dare, and I'm just going to apply a little bit of this right on the inner corner. All right, now here's the finished look. And overall, I love it. I love the shimmer. I love the depth in the outer corner. I felt like the mattes blended well through the crease. I love the pairing of the matte liquid lipstick with the gloss over top. I think it's beautiful. It's comfortable this way. Alone, the matte liquid lipsticks are a little dry. I loved how the brushes worked. I felt like they're soft. I feel like they applied both the face and the eye products really well. But now I want to spend just a couple minutes briefly and talking about two specific things. First of all, the formulation of the eyeshadows themselves in each of the palettes, and then answer the big question: are they really dupes for the Natasha Denona palettes? So as far as the formulation goes, I feel like overall, through all three of these palettes, even though I didn't demo all of these, I have tested all three of these out. And the formula, I feel like it performs well. I feel like they really did a really nice job. My favorite formulation overall that they do is actually their matte, powder matte formula. Now I say powder matte because they have started to incorporate a couple of shades to try and maybe mimic what Natasha Denona did. They've incorporated a few of these kind of cream to powder formulations in here. So even though these look like a powder matte, like this one, let's see, this one, these are actually kind of like a more creamy consistency. Those, in my opinion, don't perform as well. I do, though, love all their powder mattes and most of their shimmers. Now, in each palette, like this one, as I was applying, like these two, they're a little more kind of sparkly, less pigmentation. So the shimmers are a little hit and miss, but I have found that if you use them with a setting spray, they do apply well and they look beautiful on the eyes. I do feel like the shadows last pretty well on the eyes, and by the end of the day, there's still, most of the color is pretty much there. You do need to use an eyeshadow primer. Overall, performance-wise, how they last on the eyes, I think these are really good palettes. And the color stories, let's just be honest, I think that is the biggest thing that draws us to them. So now let's get to the second part and answer the big question. Are these palettes dupes for the Natasha Denona palettes? If you buy these, are you getting the exact same thing as these at a really big discount? The simple answer to that question is no. Now, as far as the color stories go, I think Alter Ego did a really great job of, I'm not going to say copying, I'm going to say of mimicking the color stories in each of these palettes. So I went through and I laboriously swatched not only all of these palettes from Alter Ego, but I then went through the Natasha Denona palettes and swatched those shades in the order that they're in the Alter Ego palette. What I mean by that is this: the Alter Ego palette setup is not the exact same as the Natasha Denona. So in looking at them, they're not, you know, shade for shade in the same order. But I went through and I said, okay, in the Alter Ego palette, what shade is closest to this one in the Glam palette? So I'm going to pop up on the screen those side-by-side swatches. And let's just start there. Let's start with the Shadow Kiss palette. The Shadow Kiss palette, I feel like, really, really closely resembles the Natasha Denona Glam palette. So on the eyes, I feel like they're going to look very similar. Now, colors aside, as far as the formulation goes in this palette, there are 3 shades in the Shadow Kiss palette. They are Cloak, Mist, and Disguise. So Cloak, Mist, and Disguise right here. And I feel like those 3, as you could tell in the swatches, they took quite a lot of building. So they're not as intense as you're going to get in the Glam palette. Same with the mattes. I feel like the mattes overall are really nice in here, but they did take a little more building to get to the level of the Glam palette. Next palette would be the Canyon palette, and its close relative in the Natasha Denona family would be the Bronze palette. So seeing those side by side, again, the colors are not ordered in the same order, but I went through and swatched everything in this palette. Now in this palette is where I noticed that Alter Ego was trying to duplicate the cream to powder formula that Natasha Denona has started to put into some of her palettes. In this palette, Natasha Denona did it with the dark shade right here, which is Deep Dive. And I think that's the only shade in this palette. At least that's the only one that feels like it's the cream to powder in here. So I noticed that Alter Ego tried to replicate that same feel in their deep shadow. And on the finger, well, you can already tell on the finger, but this is where I feel like the formulation is really not the same. The color is similar, but the one here in the Canyon palette, it does take a lot of building, and still, as you can see in the swatches, it's still very, very light in pigmentation. But as far as the rest of the shades in this palette, especially the rest of the mattes and most of the shimmers, I think this one, Coyote, was a little bit flaky, but the rest of them actually are quite pigmented. And now last but not least, the Harmony palette. This is their newest release. And as many of you who've watched my channel for a long time know, this is kind of my favorite color story. I love wearing these shades on the eyes, but how does it stack up to the Retro palette? So again, I'll pop up on the screen the side-by-side swatches so that you can take a look. Now in the Retro palette, Natasha Denona did several more of those cream to powder formula shadows. And so Alter Ego did that as well. And unfortunately, I wish actually they would have just kept with the powder, because I feel like the powder mattes perform so much better. The cream to powder formulas in here, so that would be Glow, it's Admire, it's Shy, and Mercy. And I feel like they just struggle to build up pigmentation, and these do not work well with your finger. The Natasha Denona ones you can apply with your finger, but these I feel like actually work better with a brush, but still you do have to really dig that brush in and layer it a lot. So after seeing all of the palettes side by side with their Natasha Denona counterpart, you can see the color similarities are so close, if not identical. But there is a formulation difference between Alter Ego and Natasha Denona. But personally, I was actually relieved to be able to see, feel, touch a difference in the formulation, because if I'm buying a palette that's $69, I want to know that that palette formulation is different than a $17 palette. Having said that, though, I think these Alter Ego palettes are really good. And if you say, Shirley, a $69 palette or even one that's on sale at Sephora is never going to fit in my budget, head over to the Alter Ego website, because they have so many of the Natasha Denona similar look-alike palettes. So they have the one that looks like the Sunset palette. They even have one that looks like the Biba palette. They even have a couple that replicate some of the Natasha Denona palettes that I don't own, that I'm like, I might need to add those to my collection. So even though the formulation is not identical to the Natasha Denona palettes, I think you are going to enjoy the looks that you create. They do perform well. Make sure you use an eyeshadow primer. And as I said, between the palettes, there can be distinctions between the color payoff. So just know you might have to build some of the shades up a little more. But I think these are a great alternative to the more spongy palettes. The way that I would recommend kind of looking at these versus the Natasha Denona is look at the color story that you are most drawn to, that you know you would wear all the time. Invest that money in the Natasha Denona palette, and then the other palettes from Alter Ego, go there. And if you're somebody who's like me, doesn't wear cool eyeshadow tones very often, but you like to have them in your collection, go pick up the Alter Ego palette for $17, and you won't feel bad if you're not using it every day. So I hope that this video was helpful for you, provided the information you needed. I will list in the description box below all of the products that I used to pull together my look today, as well as a link to the Alter Ego website. I am not an affiliate. However, they did give me a discount code for you all. I will put that across the screen here and also list it in the description box below so you can take advantage of that. I believe it's 10% off your purchase. So always a nice little perk. But thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye.